Chapter 4. The White Room. The door shut behind the man, or rather, there was the sound of a door shutting. He looked back and noticed the actual door itself was no longer present. Instead, there was only an unbroken white wall where the door frame should have been. He thought aloud, one way? When hasn't that been true? Turning his attention away from the missing door, the man surveyed the new environment. It was a pure, white, square room. The ceiling was at a comfortable height. Aside from the strangeness of his entry, the room was almost unremarkable. The entire area was evenly lit from an indiscernible light source. In the middle of the room was a white oak table with 2 white oak chairs. The man wasted no time. He set his backpack down and immediately set his mind to dealing with the frozen wound on his shoulder. He rummaged through his pack with the intention of finding a more long-term solution to his shoulder injury, but stopped short. It was an odd thing to notice. The backpack appeared as though it were brand new. To an untrained observer, the difference between the pack 5 minutes ago, covered in dust and the half-formed entrails of an unspeakable abomination, and now, was imperceptible. The man knew the pack better than most, and its miraculous restoration did not escape his notice. Most notable to the man was that the stitching on the straps near his right shoulder were perfectly in order, despite being torn along with his shoulder moments earlier. Curious, he removed a knife from one of his many pockets and cut the strap. After a few moments of careful observation, nothing seemed to happen. Thinking of another possibility, the man closed his eyes and then opened them again. His suspicions confirmed that the strap was neatly and expertly repaired. Everything in its perfect order, but I get the cold shoulder, huh? The man laughed at his pun. He stifled it quickly, realizing there was no audience for his jokes. The man knew there were 3 possible conclusions to be drawn from these data points. 1, the state of his shoulder is, in fact, its natural and perfect state. This seemed unlikely. 2, his shoulder might be in its current state because there is some reason for it to remain injured. The man wondered if fate had any influence here, but suspected that it was more probably the result of a deeper or more ancient providence. He admitted that assigning his own injuries a cosmic and divine weight was presumptuous at best and blasphemous at worst. 3, the most disturbing of the conclusions, was that there is a part of the abomination still preserved in the wound on his shoulder. The man had seen enough things in his time made from dust and ash to know that monsters come in many different sizes and forms, and a disease or virus was certainly a medium that willpower could take, given the right conditions. This possibility weighed the most heavily on the man's mind. Not one to dwell on the inevitable, he pushed the worry away as soon as it started to take root in his thoughts and decided on a more immediate and productive line of thinking and action. The man removed his goggles and hood and began to examine the walls of the room. The man ran his hand along the edge of every nook and cranny of the 4 white walls, fully intending to take in as much information as he could with as many senses as he could. Any data could be useful for analysis and planning. The first step of any reasonable action is information, and transmuting information into action was not only necessary, but a great deal of fun as well. His search continued. He focused on the chairs in the middle of the room. Clearly, 2 entities were meant to sit at the table. It was always dangerous to assume functionality in an unknown situation, but considering the perfect condition of the objects in the room, it stood to reason that functionality may also be perfected, to whatever extent the organizing force of the current furniture arrangement understands the concept. Further, one of the chairs had a small opening near the meeting of the chair's back and the seat, while the other had no such gap. The man decided the chair without the gap most closely fit his needs. Seeing no reason to delay or deny the chair its rightful function of support, the man pulled the chair away from the table and sat down. The chair was very comfortable and fulfilled its function quite nicely. The man moved his backpack closer to his left on the floor and removed the compass. Placing the compass on the table in front of him, he leaned back in the white oak chair, stretched his feet out beneath the table, and waited. A second or a billion years passed, and the man's waiting ended. He was staring off in deep thought when the sound of a closing door roused his attention. Looking down at the compass on the table, the needle pointed directly behind him. He could hear soft footsteps as something made its way around the outside of the room. The needle followed the sound. The man turned his head as soon as the sound source came into view. A smile spread across his face. It was her. "I finally found you." How long has it been? The man's greeting was met with silence as she approached the chair opposite him, arms folded across her chest. Sit, he said, gesturing to the empty chair. She regarded the chair briefly before saying coldly, I'll stand. The man could hardly contain his excitement. Although the current circumstances were not ideal for a reunion, he couldn't help but feel justified just by seeing her again at all. She was different than he remembered, but that did not surprise him given the amount of time that had passed. She was dressed in a black suit, complete with black shoes and a red tie. Her hair was cut short, and eyes burned with the red hues of 2 dying suns. The man knew this form was somewhat idealized for him, a fact that did not diminish his excitement. But he did notice a reptilian tail curled around her left leg. Pointing down at the tail, the man commented, Vestigial or functional? Just a remnant of my preferences. I'm surprised you can see it at all. I guess this means you're not as delusional as you used to be. No, more likely you've just developed a new fetish. I've always wanted to see you in your perfect form again. There's just not much opportunity for that anymore. I do want to know, how do you see me? I see the real you like I always do, Kay. The man cut her off abruptly. Do not speak my name. You have no right. I have not given it to you. Very well. Then what should I call you? What grand title have you taken for yourself recently? The man produced a leather-bound journal from his pack and placed it on the table in front of him. The worry of the third possibility creeping back into his mind, the man also produced 2 vials from his backpack, red and black, placed them on the table and spoke. I'm a watcher. It's not my name, but you can call me that. The woman let out a sarcastic laugh. What? A watcher. Oh, how the mighty have been made low. Am I to believe you came here to gather some data for your humorless lord? If that's true, you might be the greatest fool in all of creation. The man kicked the chair opposite him away from the table and spoke with unexpected authority. Sit down. I have questions. The woman's face flashed, for the briefest moment, a look of shock, followed by a sly smile. She hated nothing more than to be told what to do. On the other hand, the man's words carried a deep weight, almost nostalgic, and she could not refuse him. Her curiosity demanded to be sated. The meek and compulsive watcher before her used to be a very different creature, but his current persona could not fully snuff out the fire of his previous experiences. She unfurled her tail and approached the white oak chair. With an overly dramatic flourish, she sat down and stared at the watcher. I see you still have some of the old fire. It's a pity there's nothing left but ash. The watcher began writing in his journal. What shall I call you then? I won't presume to use your true name. I've had so many names, it's hard to choose one that captures the essence of my being. Seeing you there, with your one head, your 2 arms, and your 2 legs, I can't help but think of those wretched, godless creatures. I won't even deign to speak their name. Why do you insist on resembling them so closely? I've always had an affinity for them, and I can't say that provoking you is entirely unpleasant. What you call affinity, I call guilt. If you are guilt, then I am envy. You can call me that in your master's little book. Envy? Are you even capable of subtlety, woman? I have more claim to the name than anything else, Watcher, and I am no more a woman than you are a man. Yet there remains preferences, yes. Envy looked away from the Watcher's eyes, her tail flipping behind her in a gesture of begrudging acceptance. After a pause, her gaze returned. Why are you here? You know what this place is. There is no escape. Your first question will take a long time to explain, but I assure you it is an interesting tale. And yes, I know where we are. We're inside the Great Prison, a vast quarantine for the breakers of the old law. But aren't you excited to be here? This place is dripping with his influence. There is no point in fascination, Watcher. Not only is there no escape, there is no survival. We both face inevitable and complete annihilation. I don't see why you even cling to that book of yours, as not a living soul from here to the abyss will see a word of it. Don't underestimate me, dear Envy. I know I'm in a bad situation, but I also know it was my own decisions that brought me here. I regret many things, but I don't regret making the decision to come here. But why are you here? Give me the short version, as I'm not keen on stories. I came here for you, dear Envy. Envy was taken aback. This was not the answer she expected from the Watcher. You talk as if you are a noble knight come to save a helpless princess from her prison. Is this fairy tale what is written in your little book? I always wanted to do something important. My curse was my will. I did not ask to have doubts about my own purpose, but I had them nonetheless. These doubts saved my soul back then and led me down my current path. I saw something in your soul then, and I see it now, and it has infected me. I want to see you live. I want to see you made perfect again, in all your glory and radiance. A manifestation of beauty, not envy, with the rightful adoration of your rightful children. Envy smiled. She was caught up in the fantasy of her perfect form, the adoration of her children. The smile faded quickly as the reality of the situation re-emerged. If all you sought to do was fill me with jealousy for all of the experiences that are going to be taken from me, then you are more cruel than I thought, Watcher. There is no escape from this place. It is the end of our kind, the ultimate solution for breakers of the old law. For an eternity we will wander as sight, sound, smell, and thought are decomposed and unmade. Complete annihilation. Absolute decreation. No soul, be they Kasadaran or creation, brethren or demon, will even have an idle thought of our memory. So complete will be our annihilation that I would not be surprised if he himself retained no record of our existence. Do you not understand this, or are you blinded by some obligation to me? Or more accurately, to the version of me that you imagine? The Watcher wrote a few notes in his journal and thought carefully about his response. I am filled with fear, make no mistake. I am filled with awe as well. We are witnessing the inner workings of an ancient process. How can you not be curious? I broke the old law to get here, knowing full well the gamble I was taking. But believe me when I say this, I will change his mind. Envy leaned forward, the absurdity of the claim piquing her curiosity. You insane creature. You can't force that kind of change. Not even the infinite, cursed be its name, could do what you're suggesting. Just because it hasn't been done before doesn't mean it can't be done. There are some that believe the one who sent is no longer interested in any of us. They say his nature is too unknowable to even entertain the possibility of rationally deducing his actions. I disagree. The Watcher rose from his chair, his passion a crescendo. I believe love and loss are both needed, that the memory of anguish has to live alongside the memory of joy, and I'm willing to face complete annihilation to prove it. I can save you. I can save all of us. Never one to shy away from theatrics yourself, Envy quipped. The Watcher smiled, composed himself, and sat back down in the white oak chair. His gaze turned to the vials he had set out earlier. Time is not necessarily of the essence, but before we go any further, I need to know everything you know about a creature that attacked me. It was invisible and seemed to need only blood and dust to create a physical manifestation of itself. That sounds like one of Desuviel's toys, a Kettering. Why do you ask? What is the most efficient way to kill one? The Watcher looked to his frozen shoulder and spied a droplet of water running down its surface. You're the Watcher, you tell me. I never claimed to be any good. Besides, I thought Desuviel was consumed. Turns out that was a hope and not a fact. The Watcher's gaze did not leave his icy wound. Fire. Envy stood up, following the Watcher's body movements, unsure about his fascination with his shoulder. Good, I'll take the red vial, and then I'll leave the rest to you. The Watcher grabbed the red vial just as the icy orb encasing his shoulder broke into 1,000 silvery shards. The frozen shards of blood scattered across the table and were instantly absorbed into its white surface. Within seconds, 3 bladed appendages sprung forth from the flat top of the table, and a single bloody eye formed in its center. The Watcher kicked the table over on its side. Envy raised her hands in a defensive stance. The Watcher fell backwards in his chair to escape the reach of the flailing arms. One of the Kettering's sword arms cut clean through the bottom leg of the Watcher's chair, severing it into a burst of sawdust. The Watcher scrambled to his feet and dusted himself off. Looking to his right shoulder, he noticed the wound had completely healed. Well, that's a nice bonus. The maniacal table bent and cracked, its table legs reforming haphazardly into the creature's legs. 6-bladed arms now clawed erratically at the air near the tabletop. The Watcher inferred from the creature's flailing inelegance that table was not its preferred form. The tabletop cracked loudly, and a cavity opened near its single blood-red eye. From this blackness came the Kettering's familiar and desperate cry. The Aspect of Separation is a novel by Jeffrey Nordine. On the next episode, Chapter 5, The Dream of the Family Dinner.